Well, in listening to Class 2, as I was editing it earlier, we could make about 10 classes from everything we were given in 2. And we might well do one day. But what became clear to me as I was listening is the need to ever more understand oneness. We hear all this extraordinary truth. We hear about the finished kingdom. We hear about omnipresence, the only presence, Spirit being the only presence, therefore the only experience. We hear about Spirit or God or truth being the only form, the only mind, therefore the only awareness, and therefore again the only experience. Without mind, we have no experience. Agreed? Take your mind away and where's your experience? And yet, how many of us are still waiting for something? How many of us still believe that some more of God has yet to appear in my experience? And the reason that is still lodged in belief is that still it is believed that our experience is different from God. Yes, we can hear and believe that God is. And perhaps, hopefully, we can even hear that mind is nothing but God. But perhaps we still believe that our awareness of God means that our experience isn't full of God. And that isn't true. It seems to be true, but that's because we believe it to be true. But let me ask you, if we were all to go to the cinema tonight, and the movie was playing, but we became distracted, usually because we haven't followed directions and turned our cell phones off. By the way, little tangent, have you seen that new, I think it's a Volkswagen advert? Have you seen it? It's only 3 or 4 minutes, but Volkswagen decided to test a test audience with their new ad. So they brought about 100, 200 and odd people into the cinema to view their new advert. And the ad started. And it was about a driver, and the camera is in the driver's position, experiencing the experience the driver is having, driving along the road. And then, because they had got everyone's cell phone number before they walked into the cinema, they sent everyone at the same second a text. And virtually everyone in that cinema audience stopped looking at the movie and looked at that text, and there were cameras watching the audience. Everyone looked down or got their cell phone out of their pocket, looked down, and suddenly crash! On the screen they had portrayed the driver crashing into a tree and there being great destruction there in the road. And everyone suddenly realised what had happened. They'd been distracted by their text, and bang, before they even knew it, they'd crashed. And Volkswagen were trying to save lives in this way. A well-meant advert it was. But let me ask you something. If we are all together watching a movie and we become distracted and we forget or we become unconscious of the movie playing because we're absorbed in that which is distracting us, does that mean the movie isn't in our experience? Has the movie left the atmosphere, left the cinema or the theatre? No. It's there, but we are not. Meaning our attention, our conscious attention is on something else instead of that which, in this example, is the movie. And right there we have the whole truth, number one, about the finished kingdom, and number two, about our inability or ability to witness the finished kingdom at every step and every hour and every day, and as every form, as every resource. There it is, the whole explanation. It is all about us being aware of, which means consciously aware of, just as we are, hopefully, consciously aware of this message happening now, rather than being distracted. It's the conscious awareness. I've called it in the past the alive awareness. It has to be alive as us. In fact, in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus speaks of the man who is carrying a lamb over his shoulders. And he is conscious of carrying the lamb on his shoulders. It's a present and very conscious, alive experience for that one who's carrying the lamb. And Jesus is using this as a metaphor for truth. We must consciously carry the truth with us. And if we're not conscious of truth, then we are unable to witness truth as our experience. But that doesn't mean experience is devoid of the truth. Experience itself is perfectly fine, thank you very much, because experience itself is God. And nothing and no one, and not even distraction, not even unawareness, can change the fact, the truth, that only God is. And God is everything. God is infinite and omnipresent. And so wherever we are and wherever we look and whatever we're doing, actually, despite our awareness of it, there is the finished kingdom. And the finished kingdom means that all is complete and whole and cannot be any other way. But are we aware of it? There's the whole key. There is indissoluble oneness. That's it. You cannot change it. Your oneness with God, with truth, in fact, as God, as truth, which means your whole experience, never forget that again, you're not in the world, you are the world. You're not in the universe, you are the universe. You're not observing something outside of yourself, you are everything you observe. Just like the lighthouse is the light it's observing. In the very same way, everything and anything we're observing or involved in doing is us. And what we observe as it is all down to how much truth we know as our life, our being, our body, our mind, our world. If we know and when we know that all is God, therefore our whole identity is nothing but God, then we see God everywhere as everything, which means we're seeing, witnessing completeness and wholeness. And if not instantly, then very quickly. If something comes into our atmosphere that seems to be incomplete or lacking or in pain or in struggle in some way, and yet we are not fooled by that appearance and stay in truth, which means we're staying attentive to that movie, we're staying attentive to God alone, then very quickly, if not instantly, we witness the wholeness and completeness of whatever it is. A body, a condition, a situation, a place, an amount, an activity. Doesn't matter what it is, it's all the same thing. It's the one form, simply observed as multitudinous, because the mind is infinite variety of formation, but all of the one formation, the one form, the one truth, God. So oneness as God is indissoluble. That's an important word to understand. And so I looked in Webster for us tonight, and this is what Webster says. Incapable of being annulled or undone or broken, perpetually binding or obligatory, perpetually lasting, incapable of being dissolved into separate elements or particles, incapable of being decomposed or disintegrated. Now, what do we hear about the experience that is called by material sense death in our last class? There is no death, and the apparent experience of death, in which a body seems to be left behind, presumably leaving the one who used to occupy that body without a body, is nothing but our remaining material sense and our remaining memory of that one. But that one, him and herself, or itself, is never without body, and is right there where the body seems to be dead, standing perfectly alive and perfectly embodied. The body is, if you like, a shadow left behind in our memory, and yet it seems real because we've believed it to be something of its own self. We've believed him and her to be something of their own selves with a body. But they have no experience at all of being bodiless. It's impossible. God is always embodied. So listen to this. Incapable of being decomposed or disintegrated. Interesting. So let's explore this today and see if we can somehow hear a greater reasoning for you or authority for you about oneness and about the ever-present wholeness of God as all form. First of all, realize that there is no change of God in experience at all. There's no change. God doesn't change from the fullness that God is into a fullness of form that now appears to be finite, outlined, of a certain weight, colour, amount, place. God does not change. What we're witnessing as what seems to be a form, outlined, of a certain weight, colour, fragrance, locality, is nothing but the whole of God, unchanged. But we believe form to be something in and of its own self, and so it appears to our sense as being different from God. But it isn't. It's only God because only God is. So no change occurs from God through mind to and as our experience. Nothing's changed. Nothing's even happened. Nothing's even moved apart from our awareness of it all. Only God is. Period. Second of all, realize that the whole of God is the very presence of you this minute, and the presence of me this minute, and the presence of all this minute. The whole of God. There isn't any more to have of God, and it's utterly impossible to have any less of God. The whole is the only choice and the only truth and the only presence. And God is the infinite one form of itself, body of itself. And so in any one form, as far as we would describe form, the whole of form exists. And we witness this as we lift more and more in truth. We witness the life. I've told you for I don't know how many years of my experience with trees, that time many years ago. And I literally witnessed what to material sense looked like trees, an avenue of trees, change their formation into beings. All form, as far as we know it to be, is actually, of course, nothing specific, nothing finite, nothing rigid or solid as a form as we know it to be, but is, in fact, the whole of the one form, therefore is capable of and reveals itself to you more and more if there is a purpose to that revelation. And there is always a purpose to every being's every minute in truth. So as we lift more and more in truth and we're not distracted from truth, then you will discover the miraculous experience of form revealing itself with a purpose always, which is always a teaching purpose, a truthful revelation, a truthful wisdom coming through, knowledge coming through. It's always that purposeful, or a givingness, an expression coming through that blesses your community, your students, your clients, your neighbourhood. But always as a purpose, never a game, never just a show. That's something omniscience does not get involved in. But you will discover that any form or all form can and often does change and reveal itself as whatever is the purpose of its wisdom for you or as this moment. We'll read a little bit of the secret book of John that reveals these beautiful things. So realize this now, that you as being and you as form, not only the form of what you sense as your body, but the form of what you sense as your whole experience, or any one single seeming part of it, is, in truth, the whole of the one form that is God. In other words, it has no limit, no finiteness, no outline. It isn't really what we believe it to be only. It is the whole of God. The whole of God. And it can change completely. A book can change into a dollar into a book, or a tree into a book or a dollar, a being into whatever, a being into a tree, or a tree into a being. All is the whole of God. There's no limit, there's only infinity and omnipresence. And as is necessary for our complete and utter fulfillment of being, but more than that, complete and utter fulfillment of God as being. And remember, God is only giving, revealing more and more of itself as a giving, as a wisdom, a knowledge, a purpose of revelation and fulfillment of being and world. So God as you can and is always being utter miracles of experience with no limit, no finiteness, no bind at all, no limit at all. So in this way we learn to understand the instruction to release God ever more and more. Don't hold on to what you think you are, what you think your body is and what it's up to or not up to, nor what your world is or what it's up to. Release God. Let God be in charge of you, your body, your world, completely, and you'll begin to see the miracles of God that you wouldn't even believe. Now, oneness means that there is no place of you, as Jesus has told us, that is in versus out. There is no place of you that has to witness any change in God. There isn't any change in God because there's no place but God. There isn't any change in form because there is no form that is anything but God. And there is no any change in experience because there is no experience that's anything but God. Indissoluble oneness is what you are and what the entire world of experience is. There's no movement, there's no change, there's no transformation, there's nothing that has to happen. You are You see, I was going to add, as we normally hear, you have. Also, you are and you have. But maybe we can even drop that word have. You are, period, the whole of God. If you are the whole of God, you obviously have all that God is. And that's true. And there is nothing but God as mind nor experience. Now let's make it more practical. If you think about now, and I hope you heard the other day that you're never to worry about thought. Thought has no power at all. So think as you like. Don't be afraid of thinking about what I'm just about to give you to think about, which is a problem, because thinking about a problem has no power whatsoever. Nor thinking about good has any power whatsoever, because with any kind of thought, it can only be of the pairs of opposites, and the pairs of opposites have no power whatsoever. So think as much as you like. All right, even thinking about truth has no power. It's just a good thing to do because it clears awareness of the pairs of opposites, therefore revealing truth. Anyway, back to the story. Think about now what you believe is still missing from your life, here and now. Think about the good form that appears as a nameable good form that you would love to have the experience of this hour, this day. Think about it. It might be 10. Think about all 10. Now realize, because of the truth of indissoluble oneness, realize that you have all of that good form fully demonstrated already, not only in your being, which means in your experience now, but as your being and as your experience, this very moment. Just take a minute or two and realize that. The very form that you can name once it's here in your experience, and again, don't be afraid of naming the forms of good and fulfilled experience is very handy in order to commune with other human beings. So don't worry about it. I'm sure all the disciples were able to very happily, with a big sigh of relief, name all the food that was evident suddenly for the students of Jesus up there in the hills, when it became visible to them. So don't be afraid of it. But what we want to do is get you into the consciousness of Jesus, who is able to evidence all the good form that all the others can name. Don't be afraid of naming it right now. So right this minute, realize that all the good form that you'll be able to name, that you would dearly love to have in your experience this hour or day, and then forever, without it being variable, without it suddenly disappearing again, like water down a mountain. Where's it gone? Think about it and realize now that you have it. This second you have it. You've had it eternally and will eternally, and as much of it as you want. Because ultimately you want to share it. You want to be able to feed your world with it. It, and as much of it, and the highest quality of it is with you now, this second. And not only that, but is this second fully demonstrated for you in and as your experience. You don't have to do a single thing. And my friends, if it's 3 things or 10 things or 100 or 1,000 things that your experience seems to be lacking right now, it doesn't make any difference. They are with you, as much of them as is your utter fulfillment, and of the highest quality, such as the world has never seen before or known before. They are all with you this second and are fully demonstrated already in and as your experience, each one exactly where it needs to be in order to fulfill your entire experience. And as you realize this, you feel your whole universe relaxing, do you not? Your whole being, your whole world becomes quickly at peace. Fear dissolves. And peace fills you and permeates you. Now gently realize that that fulfilling form or amount or activity or person or place or condition or world, is God. But be careful with that word. Experience is God. And it is as impossible for experience to be missing an element or an aspect or a part or an amount or a place or a condition of wholeness, of fulfillment, as it is impossible for the ocean to be separated from its wet. The ocean and wetness are indissoluble oneness. Let's, in imagination, dive into the ocean right now and imagine the ocean as our whole universe of experience. The ocean is its whole universe of experience, let's say. And now look throughout it, visit any place of it, and would we not agree that it is utterly impossible that we could find any part of that universe of experience that was lacking wetness, separated from wetness, had less wetness over here than over there? That had to wait for wetness? Could you find any place in the ocean that knew that the ocean itself, remember this place is in the ocean somewhere. None of the ocean can be out of the ocean somewhere, can it? Any part or place of the ocean is in the ocean. Therefore has all the quality and the condition and the fulfillment of the ocean itself, because it's all one. The ocean is omnipresent as itself, at every place of itself. Any place of itself is full of ocean, full of water and wet, and saltiness. So would you find it funny that a place in the ocean could be in an experience of believing that the ocean, the ocean itself, I understand, is water and wet and salty. But I don't have enough water or wet or salt. But I'm studying that I and the ocean are one, and yet my experience isn't yet full of water and wet and salt. For some reason, my experience is devoid of the fulfillment of water and wet and salt. And I am very slow in being able to witness the fullness of the ocean as my experience. Wouldn't that be a very weird thing to listen to from a part of the ocean? Of course, even while this part of the ocean is believing that as his or her experience, we can very readily see that that's not the truth of his or her experience. The truth is that the whole of experience, including his and hers, is full of water and wet and salt, because it can't be any other kind of experience. Because if it's a place, if it is an activity, if it is a being, if it is a consciousness, if it is an awareness, if it is an activity, then the only it can be is the ocean itself, and the ocean itself is always the fullness of itself and can be nothing less or different. And this is what we've said. God is, and the only thing that can be in our experience, the only thing that can present itself to us is God. And if that's the case, which it is, then it means that everything of our experience and everything that can ever present itself to us, despite what we believe about it, is the fullness of God. And that's indissoluble oneness. The whole of God is right there, even as we're looking in a multitudinous way and seeming to witness separate things, and probably in some or even many aspects of our experience, lacking things, ill things, diseased things, poor things, unhappy things or beings or parts of our experience. What we're really witnessing, even as we believe that, is the whole of God, because there can't be anything else. And even more than that, every single aspect of our experience and what we believe to be a particular form is the whole of form. I've always said to you, $1 is actually the whole infinity of dollars, but also the whole infinity of being, the whole infinity of plants and flowers and fruits and tables and couches. All of God is at every place of itself at the same time. We heard yesterday, was it not, that we should not judge any form. Don't believe the form that you believe it to be, because it's much, 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 much more than we can ever believe it to be. It is God, which means it's infinite form. The whole of form exists in and as each form, as we would describe form, and can readily reveal itself, and often does, as our attention, just like that advert, isn't off in some other place, namely matter, believing matter, distracted by matter, absorbed in false belief. But if our attention remains in truth, we have the visibility of the miracle of truth as all experience. And so back to an awareness of the fact that what you think is missing from your experience, right here and now, probably what you've called into this class for in order to try to witness in your experience here and now. And probably, if we're very honest, again in secret, don't tell anyone this, but probably, be very honest, if you had all of your experience of fulfillment before class started, you probably would have skipped class. Because the reason you're here is to discover how to experience God as you, God as experience. Isn't it? That's a good reason to be here. You cannot separate yourself. Even more clear, you cannot separate experience from the fulfillment it is. It's impossible. Your experience is indissoluble oneness as God. There's nothing of experience that is anything but God. But you believe it to be matter. So that's just as effective in taking you away from conscious oneness as all experience as that distracting text was in the middle of the Volkswagen advert for the audience. The minute you believe matter to be what you believe it is, and how you believe it is, i.e., it's lacking, it's ill, it's diseased, it's unhappy, it's incomplete, and then all the fretting and the worry and the effort you make to find some way of fulfilling it before the deadline, or before it's too late and we're 6 foot under, is how effectively you're keeping the experience that actually is fulfillment here and now and forever as you away from your consciousness of it, your living awareness of it. So the belief in matter is the distraction. So before we go on, let's just make sure that you are able now to bring to mind forevermore, never forget this, that that which seems to be lacking or discordant or ill, disharmonious, or any of the rest of it in your experience, the fulfillment of that thing, whatever it is, or those 100 or 1,000 things, whatever they are, is with you, is fully embodied as you, and fully demonstrated already as your experience this very second. The way to see it is to come into oneness, which means bring your awareness into oneness. Do not let your awareness be distracted in appearance, which is matter. Bring yourself into oneness. And here, start thinking about God, omnipresence, infinity, spirit, light, oneness itself. Get all matter out of awareness. Do you know, it is utterly true that as you bring yourself, your awareness, into oneness and stay there, without ever having to do anything more, without ever having to take a single thought about whatever it is that you were thinking about beforehand, without having to take a single thought about the world or any aspect of it, without having to take a single thought about what you believed is lacking, limited, discordant, about what you believed is still to happen in your experience. but by simply coming to oneness and staying there, that you are the power that dissolves disease. Do you know that? Whoever walks into your atmosphere, when you are in oneness, is having their disease or illness or injury dissolved. You're not even taking a single thought about what appears to you to be a human being suffering from something. You are in oneness. And that oneness means that all is indissoluble oneness as you. And what is that oneness? God. So all being is God being. You literally do not have human beings in your awareness any longer. All beings presenting themselves to you, you consciously know and treat as, not treat as in a treatment, God. You're staying in oneness. And as oneness, you are the power that melts disease, just in the same way that the sun is the power and the presence that melts ice cubes. Do you know that? Well, now that you do, how motivated are you for your world, for every person who walks into your atmosphere, to stay in oneness? Do you know that by coming to oneness and staying in oneness, you are the food of the world? Without taking a single thought for people needing food, or a single thought for food going to people who need it, you, because of that, because you're devoid of such thinking, and are now the very presence of oneness, without any personal involvement or effort, the personal sense of you has gone. You are using yourself to be the very presence of oneness. You are about the Father's business all day long, which means the business of staying in oneness all day long. And oneness does not have thought as branches going out of its presence that starts thinking about what it is observing. Oneness knows that everything of observation or experience is itself, is oneness. It doesn't matter what it looks like. As that presence of oneness, you are the food of the world. And you will witness very often, one way or another, food coming to or finding itself in the experience of those who need it. One way or another. You are the light, you are the comfort, you are the truth of the world when you are in oneness, alone. You are the supply, you are the resource of the world when you don't have supply in mind, when you don't have resource in mind. Because the only thing supply can mean in our experience is something of the pairs of opposites, some nameable form or amount. We must be rid of it. We must be in oneness. When you are in oneness, when you are the very presence of oneness without thought, you are the supply of your world. And you will witness the miracle of what's called supply by worldly people in all its forms. Very, very often fulfill experience in the most natural way, and sometimes in the most seemingly miraculous way. But it doesn't matter to you and me. What matters is oneness, because in oneness we are the whole of God. And not only that, we are in very practical ways being the whole of God to our and as our experience. But the minute we come out of oneness, we're not. We've lost the whole thing. The minute we start taking thought, we've lost the whole thing. We've lost the truth that which seems to be needed is right here, right now, in exactly the place it seems to be needed, and is actually, despite our detection of it or belief about it, the appearance of it, in full fulfillment here and now, fully demonstrated here and now. But because we've fallen out of oneness, we cannot see it. And this is exactly what Jesus witnessed the disciples being. They fell out of oneness, so they looked out at the crowds and saw hungry people. Jesus was in oneness. All he had was God as people, God as being. And God as being is always the fulfillment of God as being, because he can't be anything but the fulfillment of being. Indissoluble oneness. Are we going to understand this? It's utterly impossible that any of experience is anything but fulfilled. And if we don't detect it as fulfilled, the only reason is that our attention has been distracted. That's all. There's no crime in that. It's a wonderful thing once we know it, because now that we do know it, we can pull it back to where it should be, which is in and as God. A student calling for healing this morning felt the whole universe of them fill with peace and light and truth, and then said, this is what the lilies in the field experience. And I was able to say to this person, yes, because the lily in the field doesn't know it's a lily in the field. The lily in the field has no awareness of its form, of its name, of the world, as we do if we believe the world, and even if we believe the lily. Because the lily doesn't have an intellect, it doesn't have any belief. It's in and as and being the fullness of God. And that's why we, in belief, can sit by the lily and watch its utter fulfillment. Greater than Solomon's fulfillment. Do you know that as you come to and stay in oneness, so that you have no physical body in your awareness, or at least, let's say, as a concern, when you've lost your body in order to gain the real body, which means, let's underline once more, you've lost your belief in your body being this physical thing, and you've lost your belief about its innards, its functions, its organs, what it needs or what you need in order to be alive. Once you've withdrawn from that distraction, that text from the devil, from belief, from Satan, who's always trying to come along with you and distract you, make you worship him, just like that text, these cell phones. I sound like some old codger, don't I? The cell phones of these young people these days. That's just like the devil trying to make you worship it. And people do, I watch them, they worship those things. Anytime it even says boo, their whole attention is down on that thing, worshipping it. Anyway, when we've lost our body as we know it, because we're in oneness, we don't have a material body in our awareness any longer, or in our concern any longer. We're unconcerned about anything of appearance. Then it is you discover your conscious, eternal experience of body. And that can be this hour, or this day, or this week. It's up to you. How much discipline you apply to now pulling yourself away from that which has been distracting to that which is true. And staying there, which is oneness. When you do, right there is your eternal body. And you now have conscious awareness of that eternal body and conscious experience of it. And you will then tend that body. And you will realize that that body is infinity. It is omnipresence. Everything of your experience is your body. We heard this beautifully in Healing of the Body and the Healing Experience back a year ago in the summer. Your body is your consciousness, which means your body is the infinity of experience, the omnipresence of experience. Now you will have the utmost reverence for all of experience, because it is your body you're experiencing. You will have a relationship with all of nature and all of other beings, a truthful relationship. Nature is easy, beings are sometimes difficult. But it doesn't matter, you just walk away from those who insist on being difficult and commune a little more with those who insist on being more truthful. But you realize in a very, very conscious way, and you have great reverence and delight and tenderness for all of the world, because all of the world is your body. And then, just as you, in your physical sense, nourish your body, cleanse your body, keep your body in a beautiful state, so you do your world. And how do you do that? You feed it with the food of truth, both in your conscious activity, this is being well versed in truth and well rehearsed in truth. That's our activity, that's our labouring in the fields of truth. And ultimately, what does that mean? Well, we've heard it today. Make sure we're not distracted. Make sure those texts are not pulling our attention away from our truth. Make sure matter isn't pulling attention away. Even good matter is not pulling attention away from its truth. Stay in oneness. That's our work. And it's a 24-hour work. And then have many periods of utter stillness and silence, nothingness, in which and through which, and then as which, God is felt. God is actually experienced, happening as being, as world. And remember, indissoluble oneness, so there isn't any separation, and this experience of God happening, peace happening and filling us, isn't a local thing. It's an infinite thing, and an omnipresently infinite thing. An omnipresent infinite thing. It's happening at every point of your whole infinity fully at the same time. Indissoluble oneness. So now as you're feeling peace happening, your whole experience is being fed the one supreme nourishment that reveals the truth that is always there but hasn't been visible and tangible and real to experience because we've been distracted. But now as we're undistracted and on the straight and narrow of oneness, and now on that straight and narrow we're giving ourselves to what we really are and what our experience really is, which is God. God reveals itself. This is what the book of Revelation is all about. God reveals itself. The truth reveals itself. And that truth, even as every individual form, very often will show it to you as an infinity of form or an infinity of experience in any of an infinite number of ways. It can just teach you. It can be your wisdom, your knowledge. It can even change its form and reveal itself as some purposeful other form. Of course it can, because it is all form. Only the distracted belief that's very, very rigid, absolutely convinced that a form is what it believes it to be, can stop or hinder from experience the infinity of form that it actually is. He's still feeling the peace and the freedom of the fact that that which seems to be lacking or discordant is actually right here with you this very moment, fully manifest, fully formed, fully present, right where it needs to be in your experience. You feel the peace, you feel the release of it. And that's only because in this hour, it hasn't changed anything. God has always been the utter, absolute, invariable fulfillment of you, your mind, your body, your whole experience. But you've been distracted. Now, let me remind you that I was the most easily distracted. So I'm not preaching, but I'm able to tell you now that it's only that distraction that hides from our individual experience the truth of experience that's always there and is infinite. It's boundless. It has no limit, even in what it appears to be. It's not limited as that which it appears to be. The whole of truth is right there. The whole thing. So let's, to finish tonight, hear a little from the secret book of John, which is a remarkable document. Hear the authority of what we've heard tonight as we read this. This is Jesus visiting John after he's risen, and after John has been tempted by the tempter again to doubt whether that experience he had with the wonderful Master was actually true and is still true and can be as practical as the Master demonstrated it to be. So John, after being tempted, said, in effect, get away from me and let me sit. And so he sat and he started lifting in truth, just as we've done today. And so we join it at this point when he's found his peace. He's found his lifted state again. He's lost that distraction. He's back with the movie. Straight away, while I was contemplating these things, behold, the heavens opened, and the whole creation which is below heaven shone, and the world was shaken. In other words, as his mind was cleared of distraction, remembering mind is form, mind is what's being called creation, the whole creation shone. The whole creation was suddenly visible to him as truthful experience. I was afraid, and behold, I saw in the light a youth who stood by me. While I looked at him, he became like an old man, and he changed his likeness again, becoming like a servant. There was not a plurality before me, but there was a likeness with multiple forms in the light. And the likenesses appeared through each other, and the likeness had 3 forms. He said to me, John, John, why do you doubt? Or why are you afraid? You are not unfamiliar with this image, are you? That is, do not be timid. I am one who is with you always. I am the Father, I am the Mother, I am the Son. I am the undefiled and incorruptible one. Now I have come to teach you what is, and what was, and what will come to pass in your experience, that you may know the things which are not revealed, and those which are revealed, and to teach you concerning the unwavering race of perfect man. Now, therefore, lift up your face, that you may receive the things that I shall teach you today, and may tell them to your fellow spirits, who are from the unwavering race of the perfect man. Okay, so right there, you see, we are each the perfect being, and everyone also is the perfect being. But why are you lifting in truth? Why are you being propelled into your truthful awareness? For one reason, so that you can feed your world. You can teach this to your fellow perfect men who don't know it yet. In Jesus' other words, he said, I am here for one reason, and that's to glorify the Father. Glorify, reveal the whole oneness of being and experience as the Father. That's my one reason, and it's your one reason, and my one reason. And I asked to know it, and he said to me, the monad is a monarchy with nothing above it. It is he who exists as God and Father of everything, the invisible one who is above everything, who exists as incorruption, which is in the pure light into which no eye can look. And we're speaking of the material sense of I, the material sense of being and awareness. That cannot look into that which is true. If you can name it, it isn't it. He is the invisible spirit of whom it is not right to think of him as a god or something similar, for he is more than a god, since there is nothing above him, for no one lords it over him. For he does not exist in something inferior to him. You catch that? Infinity can't exist in finiteness. Spirit can't exist as matter, as something different from itself. Only Spirit is. Therefore, the whole of existence, which means the whole of experience, is nothing but God and the whole of God, Spirit and the whole of Spirit. For he does not exist in something inferior to him, since everything exists in and as him. For it is he who establishes himself. Establishes. What is experience other than established experience? It is the Father, it is the truth that establishes all, that is all experience. The monad, the oneness, and nothing else. No inner, no outer, no difference, no process, no coming through. I know we use these terms because we're trying to somehow capture God as mind, as form. And so these terms are used, but equally I've always told you that these terms are not the truth. There is no coming through. There is no God through mind as experience. Actually, there's only one. The three that seem to be God, mind, form are actually one. And that oneness is indissoluble oneness. You can't find any place within it where some of it has to still happen, or some of it that is pure and whole and fulfilled. Yeah, we understand that. God is pure and whole and fulfilled. Has to now come through and reveal itself as form. That one and pure and fulfilled is the monad, is the oneness of all experience. The whole of it is the whole of it. But are we distracted? Joel had some, I'm going to be English for a second, brilliant metaphors. He said, I'm sitting here in front of our wooden table. He said, tell me, where does the wood end and the table start? It's a brilliant metaphor. Or a tumbler, where does the glass end and the tumbler start? The glass is, in our experience, a tumbler, but the glass doesn't stop somewhere and the tumbler starts somewhere. The glass is the tumbler as our form of experience. There is no difference. There is no inner and outer. There is no place where the wood ends and the table starts. The wood is the table is the wood. Now, although we can argue ourselves out of physical metaphors like that, realize now that God, the best metaphor is the one we heard about the ocean. Even that we can argue ourselves out because we seem to come to a place where the ocean stops and air starts. But come on, let's be serious and let's have some spiritual discernment and realize that infinity has no place where there is any difference. There's no center somewhere that is the infinite, that is God, that then works through some mechanism called a mind or anything else that we wish to call the former of experience, into and as experience that's suddenly completely different from the infinity and the omnipresence and the incorporeality and the spirit and the eternality that is God. God doesn't end where mind starts, and then mind doesn't end where form starts or experience starts. All is one, the monad, the oneness. Now, as long as we really hear this now and stop being distracted by that text of matter. Matter is continually texting us. Aren't these modern... I couldn't say this 20 years ago. Texts didn't exist. And I'm sure in 20 more years when people listen to this, they'll think, oh, that old man. Let's bring it up to speed here. But you see, however we wish to describe it, there is no place which then ends to become something else that ends again to become something else. Only God is. And if we do not get distracted by that which appears to be something else, even whilst it's not, then we're staying in oneness. And I hope you hear the miracle of oneness. I hope you begin to feel that by only staying in one, or first of all coming to oneness, and that involves often forcing yourself to come to oneness because the distraction of that which appears to be is very, very hypnotic indeed. All right, we know that, let's get past it. Let's have a discipline here to keep our attention where it should be, which is in oneness. But once we're in oneness, and once oneness is all we care about, once oneness is what we're interested in, what we know is the truth of us and all our experience, once we know that oneness is the fulfillment of every being, the freedom and the truth of every being, doesn't matter how that being is clothed, as just a family being, a neighbour being, a customer or a client or a patient or a student being, it doesn't make any difference. That being is, and cannot be anything but, fulfillment, her and himself. Which means the whole of their universe is nothing but fulfillment here and now. They're not lacking anything. They don't need anything. They don't need anything of matter because matter is just a ginkangook. It's nothing. It doesn't exist. It's not real. Only belief thinks it's real or believes it's real. So once we are being the God of our experience for our experience, then we are the very presence, as we hear, where the presence of the Lord is, where the presence of oneness is, there is truth, there is liberty, there is freedom, there's the release from all suffering. There's the release from all need. There's the release from all belief. You watch how belief melts for those who are just a little bit awake in the presence of you as you are being oneness, just as we're experiencing now. This whole class body is losing its belief in the pairs of opposites, and at a rate that we wouldn't even believe in the past. It's beautiful. And I'm so very grateful that we're now hearing the articulation in such a way that so many can trust, I suppose it is, to let go of that which appears to be and rest in their truth, and thereby begin to see it. Well, that piece of apparent matter called the clock is ticking along. So why don't we stop here, but let's stop with a couple or 3 minutes of beautiful silence. But remember, our silence now is in and being the awareness that everything that seems to be needed is right this second and forever fully embodied and already demonstrated for you in an as-your experience. And it doesn't matter how near or far that experience seems to be. That full embodiment of fulfillment is closer than your very breathing. The full demonstrated fulfillment of all form is closer than your very breathing. So let's rest with that awareness. And experience God happening as our being. There's no place where God ends and experience begins. God is. Experience is in God. Experience is God. Keep your attention in and as and being oneness, God. And then watch how God becomes ever more visible and real as experience.